Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. Thank you for being here. So today we're going to be covering how to map services in minutes with automated service suggestions. And today's webinar is part of the ITOM Visibility and Governance series, and we hope that you will join us for future topics. So today's session is also part of the Live on ServiceNow program, which is a curated set of events to connect you with ServiceNow experts and peers that will help you to deploy ServiceNow products and achieve value faster. You can see the complete schedule by scanning the QR code or by using a link that we're going to post in chat. And we hope that you will join us again for another webinar or meetup in the future. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. So everyone's line is muted. So please use the Q&A feature to ask your questions throughout the session. Feel free to introduce yourself when asking a question. We'd love to know who you are. Please participate in our polls. It helps us understand where you are in your deployment journey. So this session is being recorded and it's going to be shared on the ServiceNow community as well as YouTube for future playback. And then finally, after the webinar ends, you will be prompted to fill out a survey. That is a short survey, and your feedback is always greatly appreciated to help us improve for future sessions. Now, my name is Steve Emerson, and I'm the Outbound Product Manager for ITOM Visibility and Governance here at ServiceNow, and I will be your host for today's session. Now, as an Outbound Product Manager, I wear many hats. I'm a product evangelist. I do customer value realization and sales enablement internally, just to name a few. But what I love most about my role is that I get to meet with you and hear how you are using our products, and I get to share information with you about how our ITOM products can help you achieve your business goals. I've been at ServiceNow for 5.5 years and have been working with ServiceNow platform for 10 years as a customer, partner, and now an employee. And I spent the bulk of my career working in enterprise IT roles across a multitude of functions, so I know what it's like to be in your shoes. And then presenting alongside me today is Hale Tal. Hale, can you do a brief introduction, please?
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. My name is Hale. I'm part of ITOM Visibility product team. I'm in ServiceNow since 2014, but in the service mapping area since Nebula times, almost 12 years ago. And I'm happy to help you and show you the journey of machine learning service mapping. And what I have in my role is how we can improve our product to meet our customers' needs. Over to you, Sree.
Awesome.
Yeah, hi, team. Yeah.
Go ahead, Sree, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, Sree, product management director working for inbound product teams. Steve, over to you.
Thanks, Sree. And Sree is going to be behind the scenes today, answering your questions that you put into the Q&A panel. So today's webinar is going to focus on how to use automated service suggestions to map services in minutes. But before we see how it works, let's talk about why you need to map services in the first place. So the CMDB is your organization's data foundation, and it is the data foundation for ServiceNow. It is the central system of record of configuration data for your infrastructure and applications across on-premise, cloud, as well as microservices. The most successful CMDBs are service-aware, which enables you to understand the impact of infrastructure and applications to the business. Now, service visibility is the key to service operations excellence, and it enables you to make data-driven decisions based on business impact across all the use cases you see here and more. Now, before we get into our webinar, the use cases, we'd like to know which use cases that you are using today. So I'm going to launch a poll here. And if you could just take some time to fill out the poll, we'd like to know where you are using service maps on a regular basis. Is it across AIOps? Is it across change management or DevOps change? Is it across risk and compliance or BCDR? Incident or major incident management? Security, cloud transformation? Application portfolio management, certificate management and firewall auditing, IT asset management, and finally customer service management. So these are obviously a subset of use cases that service maps could be used for, but we'd like to know which ones you're using. And I still see some answers coming in. We'll give it about 5 more or to 10 more seconds. Thank you guys for participating. This is awesome data that we're getting. And I'm going to go ahead and end the poll for the sake of time. Thanks for those of you who are participated. Let's see the results. So what we see here is our top ones are incident management with major incident management, change management. Those are the top 2, which I would expect for the ITSM audience here. But we also have AI Ops is pretty popularly used, as well as IT asset management. So thanks for that. Stop sharing the results and continue. So the ServiceNow platform, of course, is underpinned by a single architecture and a single data model. Now, a single architecture means that all platform applications can seamlessly work together and are enhanced by a core set of capabilities, such as workflow, integrations, AI, and ML, just to name a few. A single data model, of course, means that all applications can leverage a single system of record, the CMDB, that is built following a common data model, which we call the Common Service Data Model, or CSDM. As you can see on the screen, the application service sits right in the center of the CSDM, and it is the critical element for representing deployed services in your CMDB. And since application services are made up of deployed applications and infrastructure, they need to be as accurate as possible. To achieve accurate and up-to-date service maps, an automated service mapping solution is needed. So let's see some example use cases. With AI Ops, you may receive thousands of alerts per day, and if hundreds of them are critical severity, how do you know which ones to work on first, right? Just throw your hands up. Well, if you have your services mapped, you'll receive a critical severity alert for a server that has a database installed on it. I should say, if you receive a critical severity alert for a server that has a database installed on it, that is part of an application service, that service will turn red on the service operations workspace like you see there with order status. So why is this important? For each service that you map, you assign a business criticality level to it. And the service operations workspace arranges services by business criticality, so that you'll be able to map to clearly see which of your most critical services are impacted and prioritize them. And when you look at a service map view from Service Operations Workspace, you can see the specific configuration items that have alerts against them, which will help you pinpoint the root cause CI of the alert. Our second use case is change management, so that when you are planning a change, how do you know how the business will be impacted by that change? When you have your services mapped and you create a change for a specific configuration item or items, the Refresh Impacted Services feature automatically will enable you to see impacted services right on the change form. So this enables you to reduce the risk of a failed change and easily know who owns each service to coordinate approvals with. And also, if you have your services mapped, you can enable unauthorized change detection, whereby if you do not have a change record opened at the time a configuration change was discovered, an unauthorized change request will be created. Of course, oftentimes, unauthorized changes are the probable root cause of an outage or degradation. Now, by default, unauthorized changes are created as emergency changes. Now, in this example, an emergency change request was created for an unauthorized change of a configuration file. Now, ServiceNow stores versions of configuration files in the CMDB, which enables you to perform a comparison between two files and see exactly where the change was made. And if you determine this change needs to be reverted, well, you could open up a change request and assign it to the appropriate team for implementation. Moving on to use case number 3. So when you respond to vulnerabilities and you have so many that are deemed critical, how do you know which systems you should patch first? So when you have your services mapped, you can prioritize patching of systems based on related business impact. You could start with your most critical business systems first, and you work your way down the criticality scale. Of course, also factoring in the severity of the vulnerability itself. And finally, our last use case example Service mapping helps you streamline the build-out of your application portfolios using this following approach here. First, Discovery discovers your infrastructure and your applications, including installed software and hardware details. SAM Pro and HAM normalize software and hardware product models and provide lifecycle details. Service mapping, of course, automates the application service discovery, which we know is at the core of the CSDM. There is a suggestion engine that suggests software and hardware models that belong to an application service. And through relationships, these hardware and software models become part of the business application. And once you have your application portfolios built out, you'll be able to manage your technology lifecycle at the business level with Technology Portfolio Management, or TPM. So here you can see the software and hardware lifecycle events. When software reaches end of life, it becomes prone to hacks, which increases risk to your business. When hardware reaches end of life, it is less performant, which can lead to degradations or outages. So TPM enables you to create demands or projects to address the pending end of life situation in advance. And in doing so, you'll be able to reduce risk, improve your security posture, and save money on unnecessary extended maintenance contracts, and you'll be able to avoid potential fines. So let's see how automated service suggestions for service mapping works. So I just discussed why service mapping is the key to service operations excellence with some use case examples. So now let's see how service mapping in and of itself works as a product. So our solution provides 3 complementary methods to map services. Together, these allow you to address a wide range of service mapping scenarios and requirements that give you the flexibility to choose the optimal approach for your specific goals. So tag-based mapping builds service maps using discovered tags or keys and values from your virtualized, cloud, and containerized resources. If you have quality tag data across your resources, you can easily map hundreds of tag-based services in minutes. And if you do not have quality tag data, you can use our tag governance application available from the store to define and enforce your tagging policies. Now, ML-based service mapping uses machine learning to identify meaningful traffic-based connections to be added to service maps. This makes it ideal for bulk mapping of services from scratch and extending top-down maps. You'll be able to reduce the amount of time it takes to map services from weeks to minutes. And then top-down mapping uses the pattern-based discovery to identify service connections. So this method, of course, takes the longest because it requires application architecture research up front, deep technical knowledge in pattern building. So because it is so precise, top-down mapping is very well suited for mapping your mission-critical services. So today's webinar, we're going to focus on the middle one, which is the machine learning-based mapping with our new automated service suggestions. So first, as a next poll, we'd like to understand which methods of service mapping are you using today? So I just launched the poll. Are you using top-down based, tag-based, ML-based, dynamic CI groups, APM service graph connectors such as Dynatrace or AppDynamics, manual maps, or you're not mapping services at all, which I put yikes there because you should be mapping your services. So let's take another 10 seconds or so. Great data coming in, guys. Thank you. All right, I'll share the results. And it looks like the bulk of you are doing manual mapping, right? Which is okay if you have static-based services, but really you want to start to map your services in a more automated fashion. And top-down, which is our traditional method, seems to be the second most used. Some of you are using tag-based, some of you are using ML-based, and some of you are not mapping your services at all, which is very concerning to me. But I digress. Move on to our next slide. 2 more slides before we get to the demo, folks. This will give you an understanding of how we have evolved the ML-based service mapping solution since we introduced it. So we first introduced ML-based mapping with Quebec, which uses machine learning, of course, to suggest those meaningful traffic-based connections. Each connection suggestion has that confidence score to help you decide which connections you'll want to add. So in Rome, it was more of a manual method to add the connections to the map. Fast forward to, I'm sorry, that was Quebec. Fast forward to Rome, we introduced a rules engine to automatically add connections to service maps globally or to specific services based on criteria that you define. So for example, you could create a global rule for adding all high confidence connections to all service maps globally, or you can create a local rule to add all processes listening on a specific port to a specific application service. Around the time that Rome was released, we also introduced the Service Mapping Plus Store application, where it first had an application service readiness dashboard for monitoring the health of your ML-based service mapping, and also a readiness dashboard, a prerequisite to track, essentially. In the San Diego family release, we introduced load balancer connection suggestions, which detected whether or not a connection suggestion is a virtual IP address, or a VIP. So confidence scores for VIP connection suggestions are based on connections to resources behind the VIPs. And then in Tokyo, we decoupled service mapping from the family release. What that means is that going forward, all service mapping innovations are now part of the Service Mapping Plus Store application to ensure that we can release updates more frequently and that it's no longer tied to a specific family release as well. And then, of course, with November 22, we introduced the automated service suggestions feature with Service Mapping Plus. So until today, the question of where do I begin when mapping services was the biggest challenge, right? So it was difficult to understand what entry point I should use, essentially. So we are very pleased to announce the release of automated service suggestions, which eliminates this question by suggesting service candidates that include a pre-identified set of resources to be included in the map. And with just a few clicks, you'll be able to gain business context for your infrastructure and apps, and the service maps will be kept up to date for ongoing use across all the use cases we talked about earlier. So with that said, I'm going to turn things over to Hale to show you how to set up and use ML-based mapping as well as automated service suggestions, of course. But of course, as a reminder, please place your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll answer them behind the scenes, or we'll answer some of them live later on. So Hale, over to you.
Thank you, Steve. And I hope everybody see my screen now.
Yes, I can.
So, as Sree mentioned, traditional mapping use pattern to create a connection. So you can see if I define patterns for WebSphere or Oracle and define connection section, it creates a connection between the CIs. So if you open the log, you can see there are a connection section and a notification section, and that, as Steve mentioned, need familiarity with the technology, with the configuration file, and need to also be experienced in pattern development. When we released the ML-based mapping, so we came with a traffic-based solution that consume TCP information and running process information collected during the horizontal discovery. There were a machine learning job that bind process to process using the connect to and listen to port information. And once you do that and you define a rule, you can see that the map built automatically. You added entry point. If you check the connection suggestion, you see that all the connection added automatically to the service using the rule that you defined before creating the map. But again, it's required familiarity with the entry points and go to the service owner and ask them question. And when we came with a new feature, Service Mapping Plus, that released in Service Mapping Plus November store release, the service candidate. So again, it's part of Service Mapping homepage, new homepage. We have the readiness dashboard that show you if the application fingerprint job that released in Paris consume the data in the running process data in your system, if the UI suggestion job consume the TCP information in your system, the system property, and if some of the properties are not in state ready, you can click on it and you navigate to the relevant property. You can set it, save, and go back to the machine learning dashboard. And as I mentioned, Steve mentioned in in November timeline, we added a new feature that is also part of the Service Mapping Plus new homepage. It's called Application Service Candidate, and you can see here candidates that generated using your information, the running processes and TCP information. You can check the service, click on preview map, see how the service look like, and if you please, you can choose to create the service. Sorry. So if I please from the preview map, I can click on create service, give it a name, and click on create service, and that's it. So you don't need to look for the entry points. You don't need to go over and run after service owner. And once you're done with it, you have a message that the service created successfully. If you click on the link, you have a new tab, navigate to the service, and you can see the service creation running, and you can go and let's keep. Okay, so you can see the service that created using the candidate. If I'm compare it to the same service I created using the UI suggestion, so you can see that it's the same service, just this one created by automatically define the entry point. So how this happening? So we have the process-to-process binding job that released in San Diego. On top of it, we release the machine learning generate candidate jobs that taking all the process-to-process information. Just a minute. Yeah, it's taking all the process information and start split them to services. Okay, so each service have bunch of process-to-process, and once it's the job done with splitting all the pairs of process-to-process, it start running algorithm that minimize the entry point, eliminate the entry point to have the minimum entry point that can build the service. So once this job also done, if I click on the candidate, you'll see the candidate information, the AFP suggestion, the application fingerprint job that run and give a suggestion for this process. And if I click on preview map, it can show me how the service will look, and I can choose to create this service. Okay, so once you have this information and you have the candidate in place, you can filter out the candidate. So the default filter shows minimum 4 CIs, means if the CIs have less than 4, if the service have less than 4 CIs participate, it filter out. Again, we also show candidates less than 100 CIs, so we won't create huge map, but again, you can play with these filters, remove them, or set them to different threshold if you want. I will show it in a minute. Another default filter is that all the entry points suggested for the candidate not participate in other services. You know that when you create a map, if a same entry point added to the new service, you have exception that block the creation of the map because the entry point is unique per service. So you see this filter that show that all the participate entry points in the candidate are not in use with other services. Okay, and if you want to change the default, you can click on advanced view, and then you can change the parameters, or add or end condition. Let's say that you have the candidate number and you want to create candidate, I don't know, that contains 005. So again, and once you update, the list will be updated with the candidate or the filter that you apply. In my case, it says less than 5 CI, so it's a filter out. But anyway, in any point of time, you can restore the default and get the out-of-the-box defaults and see the candidates generated. And again, you can, once you create a service, you can continue with that. You have the application hints. So if you know the processes participate in the service, you can filter the candidates by that. If it's Java based, Kubernetes, or other process that you want to map. If Nmap is available and there is response for Nmap, the candidate suggestion name, extract the header and put it here, okay? And this is for November release. In our future release, we plan to add another criteria or attribute to the table. One of them is comma separator device list. So if you know the device participate in the maps, you can filter the candidates per device. And the other attribute is if this candidate has any LB service participate on it, so you'll see the LB service name, so it can give you also hint if this is the candidates you want to map. So the candidate service can be finance, SAP, etc. So this is how you create a candidate. Again, the prerequisite for it is that you have the Service Mapping Plus version 1.6.0 deploy your instance. This store up is free of charge for all instances that has Service Mapping plugin activated. So no need additional charge for that. That's it for the candidates.
Yeah, maybe we can have few questions answered, because I see a lot of questions coming in from the audience. So if I want to summarize the questions, right? So what is the key difference between the automated service mapping versus the top-down mapping, right? How this is uniquely differentiated, right? If you look into the narrative, right, of typical top-down mapping, you have to give an entry point. And for entry point, you'll be talking to an application team or run a survey and ask them, hey, give me the entry points, give me the architectural diagrams. But majority of times, we will have all the raw discovery data. When you run the horizontal discovery, it collects running process, traffic data. It's a very raw data set. And using the running process data, we create application fingerprints. And this was introduced in Paris release. And then the traffic data, again, is super raw. So we synthesize all the raw information using the machine learning algorithms. The automated service suggestions is giving you the list of service maps that you can create with a single click experience where you don't have to give an entry point, right? That is the key messaging. So if you have existing discovery data, strongly encourage you to deploy the Service Mapping Plus store application. It will deploy certain clustering scripts and algorithms, will kickstart will identify the candidates, and there are two tabs that Hale showed you. One is the readiness checklist, will give you a complete perspective whether of all the settings are ready, all the algorithms are collecting and synthesizing data using our ML algorithms. And then if you go to the service candidates, it will show you all the candidates, right? And here, again, the key differentiating factor is you are not giving an entry point. The machine learning is auto-suggesting the potential connections that are super important for the map creation, right? That's point number one. Secondly, there was also questions on saying that if you already have a service map build, can you, instead of creating a new application, right, can we add it to an existing app service? That was another set of questions I see in the Q&A. And even for this, it's a roadmap item that we are tracking for the next release. In the May timeline, we will definitely unlock this capability. But the other important factor about the ML-based mapping is, if you look into that AFP suggestions, AFP stands for application fingerprinting, and this is again a prerequisite that you need to have successful horizontal discovery running on all the infrastructure. And if you go to those two tables in your CMDB, a table called running process and a table called CMDB_TCP. So these two table data sets are the only requirement for the successful service mapping, automated service mapping suggestions. And you don't have to give complex config file access like top-down mapping, which was one of the biggest challenge, where you'll be able to discover the Tomcat, but you cannot discover the config files. And without config files, the top-down will just stop because it's going to parse the config file to find the next hop connections. But in case of automated service suggestions, we are purely dependent on these two tables. If you have data sets, these two tables, the algorithms will do the prerequisite checks, the mapping will create candidates, and you'll be able to successfully quickly build maps without even entry points. So let me pause here and let's look into other questions that we can answer. So I think we kind of answered most of the questions. Just please again, share some of those Q&As as well. But to again add a few summary on the overall mapping techniques that we have introduced. So Steve, if you have that slide, right, that shows different mapping techniques. We can quickly go over this one by one and see which mapping can be applied for what use cases.
I'll bring it up right now, Sree.
Yeah, so by default, we have this three important mapping techniques that we support with our solution stack. So traditionally, if you look into your workload strategy, you can run your workload on-prem with vCenters, with hypervisors, or you can run your workloads in cloud VMs, or you can run your workloads in containers, or with modern cloud-native functions. So when you look into these different workload dimensions, right, you will see that which mapping technique can be used for what workload. I would say top-down is best fit if you have a data center and where you have load balancers, where you wanted to build a surgical mapping experience, and you have some good credential access within the server infrastructures. Because the way top-down works is you need to have an entry point as an input parameter, and it goes to the load balancers. It finds all the connections using the top-down approach, which requires patterns that has to be executed on the target devices. On the cloud and container workloads, we have seen tag-based mapping, very effective. We have several thousand customers using this approach to quickly build simplistic maps, and even customers who were able to add tags to the mainframe data sets, even things that we don't discover, and then they use tag-based maps to build that application context. The third dimension is the machine learning based approach. And this again is an evolution of capability that started with the Paris timeline, where the application fingerprinting looks into the clustering of those processes. Then it evolved into and service mapping, ML connection suggestions, where within your top-down map, you can just go to connection suggestions and add extended connections to your map easily without writing any complex pattern steps. And then in the next release, we introduced a policy-based approach, so that if machine learning is saying, hey, I'm confident that this connection is important, then all those can be automatically added with a simple policy rules engine. But now you're seeing the final evolution of how the product was initially designed to work, right? Where as a customer, as a partner, you don't have to give an entry point. If you look into the raw traffic data, you are able to see the traffic between server A, server B, server C. You know what process is opening up ports, what process is listening to the ports. You also have the load balancer discovery that has visibility to the VIPs and the physical IP address. Now, machine learning is able to connect all the dots, and it's saying, hey, here's the list of all service map candidates that you can create with a single click experience. You select a candidate, you can preview a map, you can see all the logical application service connections, and then you'll be able to quickly build a map, and an entry point is automatically added to the service map, right? That's a huge value statement for our customers. The other big question, Steve, I see is if you can open up the CSDM data model. There was questions around like how this enables the app services candidate. So let's quickly go into the CSDM conceptual model. Yeah. So here, if you look into the data model angle on CSDM, CSDM has different entities, like business application is an entity heavily used by design teams. And you have business services, which is an entity that heavily being used for the consumer-facing, customer-facing apps. And then there is an entity called application service, which is related to the configuration item. So when we talk about discovery, it is the responsibility of discovery to collect the servers, load balancers, network devices, populate the raw information into the config management table, CMDB tables. An application service is a construct that is going to build the relationships between the apps that we have discovered from the discovery. A good example is you may have a checkout service in a banking application, and the checkout service may be having a checkout service dev, checkout service production, checkout service stage, and behind each application service, you will have the infrastructure that is responsible for providing that service. So the service mapping is responsible for connecting the infrastructure to application services, and then build that model in a constructive way so that we can use it for different outcomes like the ITSM, AIOps, and all other outcomes that Steve highlighted. But the other entities that like business services, business applications, this data model has to be constructed because these are all non-discoverable data model. And if you look into the store, we have an application called Service Builder. And there are some YouTube narratives that we have created. Strongly encourage you to try Service Builder because it helps you to augment the app services with the constructs, other constructs that you can dynamically build. And that was again, a set of questions that I see in the chat as well. So Steve, I'll hand over the floor to you.
Thanks, Sree. I believe we can go back to our demo now by Hale.
We're done with the demo, Steve.
Oh, you finished the demo? Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so let me then reshare my screen and continue. 1 second. right, so what we like to do is I'll share another poll with you. And what we like to understand is, now that you have seen this in action, right, how soon do you plan to try this out? You're going to try it out today? You were so excited what you saw, you're going to try it out today? Maybe next month or the next 6 months, within a year, or maybe you just don't know yet. And there'll be a question as you leave the survey, if you want help with this. So you could actually put your contact information in there and somebody will reach out to you to help you with it. But I'll leave the poll up for just a little while longer. And we'll get some more results. Then we'll go ahead and end the poll. Okay. So it looks like most of you are going to be trying this out within the next 6 months. A lot of you will try it out within 1 month, and then some of you are actually going to try it out today, which is awesome. And again, so if you have any questions on how it works, there'll be some resources that I'll share with you to get in touch with us. But stop sharing. So we do have some time, Sree, for more questions before we wrap up.
Yeah, so let me then go over the remaining questions. So question from Peterson, can this automated feature fill in the gaps if we already have some relationships such as application to server? Peterson, the answer is absolutely yes. When discovery discovers, we discover the server, but also the running applications like an Apache, SQL, databases like Oracle, SQL servers, and so on. But what service mapping solves is the connectivity between this application. So if I have an entry point like an IP address and port or a URL, that is again an entry point needed from the application consumption perspective. What kind of infrastructure elements are connected between each other? That's exactly what service mapping solves. And ML-based mapping can further accelerate your service map creation because you don't have to ask for an entry point. It's already looking into that data set and it's coming out with recommendations saying, hey, you can build these maps automatically. What service mapping cannot solve is automated building of the CSDM constructs, or like we cannot name a service, right? Like, hey, somebody has to tell this is checkout service, right? The naming convention, the nomenclature that you follow with your app APM and SPM related products, you'll have to have some human intelligence added to this automated service mapping features. The next one is from Kiran, how horizontal discovery is related to ML. Horizontal discovery plays the foundational data layer where it goes and collects the running process and traffic data. If these two data sets are collected by horizontal discovery, then the algorithms work on top of it, and then it'll give you all the recommendations for service mapping suggestions. And once you build a service map, it again goes and validates whether the running process and traffic data exists on the target host. So it's not just going to build a map based on the data sets that it sees from the CMDB tables. The beauty of service mapping is like it wants validation, it wants verification that the application CI, like say SQL Server exists and it's listening to a port, right? This validation will be done by service mapping. And do my process have to come from CMDB discovery or can it be integrated from Tanium? This is again a phenomenal question. So question from David, we introduced service graph connectors that can source data from third-party data sources like Tanium, SCCM, and even like customers use CrowdStrike and all other security agents. And as of today, we have ability to collect this extended data set from Tanium, like especially running process and traffic data. And if you apply machine learning on top of it, we can still build maps. And there is already a feature in the backlog to support map building based on the CMDB data. And you're going to see that in action pretty soon next year, where this feature will unlock the service graph connectors to contribute the data sets, and service mapping, automated service mapping can also build maps on top of it. Today, you can use tag-based and other approaches with third-party sources. The ML-based approach is coming soon. Archana, the recording will be available in YouTube, so you can definitely take advantage of it. Let me check what are the questions we have. I think majority of questions are, we'll try to answer it in the chat itself. We do have a very nice blog written by Steve, and there is already a YouTube narrative on this product. So if you are planning to try it, deploy the solution, give few hours for the machine learning to synthesize the process, and to start recommending some suggestions. And also it requires a decent data set, right? And if you are trying it in sub-prod, right, and especially if you have a production clone, make sure the mid server will, especially connected to the sub-prod environment, does have access to the prod, because when you add a service map, it is going to do the real top-down mapping of saying, hey, go and performing validations, whether the CIs exist, right? And it works only with the production CIs. That means like, the server has to be, the lifecycle state has to be in certain stage. If the lifecycle state is not in production, right, so it's going to be stopped. So make sure that in your cloned environment, all the prerequisites are met before you start the exercise. So Steve, I'll hand over the floor to you for final thoughts and comments.
Yeah, thank you, Sree. And for those of you on the chat, I just reposted the link to the document with the links in it. It's got the links for everything in this webinar. So for those of you who joined after I posted it last time, you will now have access to that. So some resources that Sree was mentioning, you can see here on the screen. We have a getting started blog. We have a how-to demo. We have a video on ML-based mapping in general. We have a guide in our Now support for ML-based connection suggestion troubleshooting, if you should come across any issues there. And also, one thing we didn't mention is the preview map functionality that Hale showed. That works out of the box on Tokyo. If you have Rome or San Diego, you just need to apply an update set for the preview map functionality to work. There's a link there to download the update set from our Now support site. So please make full use of these resources. We appreciate that. Now, the innovation that you see in ServiceNow products is really largely based on your needs, our customers. So we always encourage you to submit ideas on our idea portal. So recently this was moved over to the Now support from the ServiceNow community. So go to support.servicenow.com/ideas, and you can submit a new idea, or you could upvote an existing idea. So once an idea receives upvotes from at least 10 unique customers, it's automatically raised to Sree and to Hale, right? So that our product team can consider it for our roadmap. So we have a call to action for everyone here today. And we have a challenge for you as well. And I'll get to the challenge towards the end here. But, just to recap the steps to start using automated service suggestions, right? Install Service Mapping Plus 1.60. Use the application service readiness dashboard to check to see if your instance is ready for ML mapping. And if it's not, just follow the steps to turn on the necessary plugins and things like that, right? Then you can start to use the application service candidates dashboard to begin mapping your service candidates. And again, these are new services only, right? It's not for existing services that you've already mapped. So we just had up at our World Forum, Sree and Hale were there, so they can attest to this. We had a customer who was able to map 50 services in one day by using automated service suggestions, and they presented their story at the World Forum in Toronto. We're trying to get a link to that available to everybody, and I'll share it out once it's available. But this is extremely powerful, and these were not regular maps. These are very complex service maps. So begin mapping your service candidates. Showcase those maps that you've built over to your stakeholders, right? All the use cases I showed you at the beginning of the webinar. Get those stakeholders for those use cases excited about it. And then what we'd love you to do is, this is the challenge, right, is share how many services that you've mapped on LinkedIn with the hashtag ServiceMappingisBack. And we'll keep an eye on that to see, how many services you are mapping. And we encourage everyone to do an active search for that hashtag to see how you're doing it, and you can then interact with one another to see how you're using our technologies. And of course, we are here to help you. All right, so ask your ServiceNow SMEs for help. Reach out to your account team. Ask a question on our community. There's lots of very great SMEs there. Your account team can engage us, Sree, myself, Hale, or any right resources to help you if you have any questions about how this works, or if you just like to work with us, on this technology. So we are taking a break from hosting webinars in December. But we will be back in January to continue this visibility and governance webinar series. So please join Severin and me on January 17th, where we're going to cover how to deploy and manage Agent Client Collector at scale. Now, the registration link is not yet there, but it will be there soon. So now would also be a great time to go back and watch our other webinars in the series. So see the links in the chat document that I put in there with all of our on-demand content. Now, I know a lot of you have asked about availability of this solution. So service mapping, the product itself, all the methods that we talked about are all part of service mapping. Service mapping is included with ITOM Visibility, which is a suite of products that enable you to gain visibility across your entire estate. Right? We didn't talk about any of these other products today except for discovery, and we touched on service graph connectors. But for complete visibility, you have the ability to use our solutions to really help you. So to learn more about how we can help you, you can certainly watch those on-demand videos, as I mentioned, where we cover a lot of these different topics. But you could also reach out to your ServiceNow account team, and somebody will get in touch with you to kind of walk you through our solutions. So with that said, I wanted to thank everyone for attending. We had a great audience today. Thanks for your interaction. And have a great rest of your day, everyone. Bye-bye now.